Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to watch the presentation today. So this presentation will be about the public perceptions of PFAS, and it comes off the back of a report that was commissioned by the Royal Society of Chemistry and delivered by YouGov. And it was a survey that took the answers from over 4,000 respondents representative of the UK population, including different demographics and geography. And I highlighted two focus groups after to get a bit of an idea around public priorities around PFAS. So thinking about what they thought about PFAS, if they knew about PFAS, and also what they wanted to see in terms of changes and alternatives to PFAS too. So you can scan the QR code on the right here. If you want to find the full report, it will be on the RSC website. The reason why this work is important is because obviously we know that PFAS does not easily break down and it can build up over time in humans, animals, and the environment. They also considered contaminants of emerging concern, so that means they're not always controlled or monitored. And another key thing is that our knowledge of the toxicity levels of PFAS is varied, meaning some PFAS we know are toxic, some are unknown, and some might have low levels of toxicity. So combining evidence and understanding of the public's views and priorities on PFAS and contextualizing this with findings from a wider policy evidence base can help us help regulators effectively to manage and manufacture the use and disposal of PFAS. So the first part of the survey looked at the awareness of PFAS from the public's point of view. So a key statistic was that 67% of the general public were not aware of PFAS. So this was presented to them as PFAS and forever chemicals, and they were asked if they had heard of them, and then they sort of, once they responded, they were given a little bit of a background of those materials. It's really important because the RSC is considered transparency and citizens' right to know as two very important principles for the management of chemicals in the environment. And a continuation of that question where they were presented with different sort of categories, for example, food packaging or non-stick pans, and they were asked if they thought these products contained PFAS or not. So 65% and 63% recognized food packaging and non-stick pans. However, only 21% of the respondents knew that drinking water could contain PFAS. Moving on from the topics then around, I did that bit there because I shouldn't have said that. So continuing on from the awareness of PFAS, 72% said they were unlikely to have avoided purchasing product containing PFAS, but this was only because they did not know enough about PFAS, not because they wanted to specifically avoid PFAS. There were also some mixed opinions if all someone know PFAS posed risk to environment and health when they were asked, which is also true because we do not know if this is the case. But in general, participants expressed desire for better public and consumer information, so they had an appetite to find out more about PFAS and become more aware. And a key sort of quote from one of the focus group participants was they expressed that the experience was very informative and stimulating, and they thought that it would help to educate the public and help society make positive changes. So this is why this work is quite important. The next section of the survey looked at what actions could be taken on PFAS. So 9 in 10 of the respondents said it was very important to control PFAS in the 3 areas, including food, drinking water, and the environment. And when they were asked who should take responsibility for reducing PFAS levels, majority of the respondents said that it was the chemical manufacturers and the product manufacturers, but also listed the UK government too. However, on the flip side of this, when they were asked who they trusted to take the action, they actually had very, very low trust in the same manufacturers and the UK government that they said were most responsible. So if we look at some of the focus group priorities, people said that it was the government's responsibility to enforce the PFAS laws and regulations. And when they were probed further about who they could trust then if they didn't trust the manufacturers, they highlighted charity organizations, as long as there was clarity on where they were getting their funding from. And they also expressed desire for information to always be verified by credible organizations and experts. So they could recognize that social media was important, but they would prefer to get their news and information from sort of regulated news services where the information could be verified. The next section of the survey looked at the management of PFAS. So for toxic, low or no toxicity, and unknown PFAS, the participants were asked what sort of changes they wanted to see. Overall, most of the participants wanted to see at least some net action for toxic or low or no toxic, or all three of the different toxicity of PFAS. So this is good, and this is something that we have been asking for. And then going off the back of that, the RSC has proposed risk-based management approaches for PFAS across their life cycle. And this was seen by the respondents who said over half wanted more effective controls and they preferred a risk-based approach. The RSC has also spoken about taking into account the precautionary principle, and focus group participants agreed that this was important for PFAS of unknown toxicity. One thing was only 3 in 10 of the participants wanted essential uses approach, but this is something the RSC has called for a better understanding of so that we can have alternatives to inform our decisions as well. So looking a little bit closer at the support for the measures to fund the removal of the PFAS from our environment, the survey participants were asked which of the measures they would support and which they would not support, and if they didn't know. Of course, one of the key things here are that they did not want to see an increase in cost of domestic water bills. So you can see that highlighted at the top. Only 25% would support this. But some of the key things that they wanted to support for funding the removal were regulations requiring PFAS using industries to reduce and reverse the contamination. So this is very heavily supported, as well as additional government funding for research and innovation, and a fee or a tax for industries for the end-of-life management and environmental cleanup. So again, this is tying up with the responsibility for manufacturers and the government to handle PFAS. The RSC has mentioned that they want the UK government to have a comprehensive monitoring program for contaminants of emerging concerns, of which PFAS is part of. We've also discussed before industrial use of PFAS, having to test the wastewater discharges and apply appropriate treatment and removal, and also having a public and accessible database to record PFAS, which will help us manage going forward. And finally, implementing a polluter pays principle from the government so that the industries who are producing the problematic PFAS are the ones that are paying for it. So these ideas from the RSC that they have discussed in previous reports tie into the data and ask of the public as well. So finally, moving on to the alternatives to PFAS section, which is what the event is about. So the RSC YouGov study asked questions about the use of PFAS versus any alternatives and tried to understand the trade-offs that people were willing to accept. In general, people didn't want to see any alternatives to PFAS that would negatively impact their health or the environment, because this were their priorities when asked about previously in the survey. So when we looked at this a little bit deeper, comparing it against voting behavior, we can see there's quite an apolitical issue, because regardless of the party voted for in 2024, everybody wanted to see a priority for alternatives not harming human health or the environment. And then to kind of understand the sort of trade-offs that they were willing to accept, they mentioned having low performance or increased costs or reduced availability, but there were some sort of stipulations around this. For example, the cost should not increase significantly for products that were deemed necessities. They recognized that some highly specialized sectors where PFAS substitutes might not be available, that they would be expecting a reduced availability. And again, they reiterated that it was the manufacturer's responsibility to research and implement easily accessible alternatives and not offload those costs to consumers. So the types of changes basically depended on the type of product that PFAS needed to be replaced in. The focus group participants also highlighted, again, that they wanted more information. So this goes back to the awareness in the beginning. They wanted to see specifically labeling and product information so that they could make informed choices themselves. They also expressed frustration with the perceived lack of investment in safer alternatives. So for them, they didn't think that there was much investment going into it, PFAS alternatives. So just to conclude now, the highlights from the survey and from the research. It brings together a large body of scientific policy evidence, and it's demonstrating very clearly that the people care about PFAS, they have an appetite to learn more, and they want to see change as soon as possible, which means the government should also want the same thing. The RSC's Cleaning Up UK Drinking Water campaign, which was launched in 2023, has already contributed to more stringent guidelines of PFAS in drinking water. So this shows that this sort of work is very important, and it does, engaging with the public does have benefits, and it does work. So moving forward, of course, the RSC will continue to engage with policy, scientific evidence, stakeholders, and the public to try and work towards sustainable and meaningful change for PFAS use and management. So just to highlight as well, as we come to the end, that a lot of the ideas that were taken to support the survey findings were from our previous reports from the RSC, so I've included them here. You can find these all on the RSC's website as well, or you can follow the QR code. And just to say thank you to the team who have helped support this work from YouGov and from the Policy and Evidence and from the public engagement and comms team from the RSC as well. So finally, just thank you for listening. And of course, if you have any more questions, feel free to contact the RSC Policy and Evidence team. The email is listed over here.